The morning sky stretched like brushed steel, with wisps of fog dancing above the firing lanes at Ridgewood Precision Range. The air carried that distinctive scent of cordite, mixed with dew-dampened earth. This wasn't just any shooting ground. Ridgewood had earned its reputation as the proving ground where legends were born and egos were shattered. Veterans in tactical gear worth more than most people's cars moved with practiced confidence, their expensive rifles gleaming under the pale sunrise. None of them paid attention to the woman in the faded blue hoodie standing quietly near the registration table. Why would they? She was just another volunteer, there to hand out paperwork and point newcomers toward the bathrooms. What they didn't know was that in exactly 17 minutes, Sarah Martinez would fire a shot that would shake the foundations of everything they believed about talent, assumptions, and the quiet power of the underestimated. Ridgewood Range attracted elite marksmen for one notorious reason: the Devil's Crosswind, a swirling air pattern that had humbled Olympic champions and military snipers alike. The range sat in a natural valley where three wind currents collided, creating conditions so unpredictable that even seasoned professionals struggled to maintain consistent accuracy beyond 600 yards. Sarah adjusted the volunteer badge hanging crooked on her sweater, taking in the meticulously maintained facility. Wooden benches stretched in perfect lines. Distant targets caught the early light like silver coins, and the crack of test shots echoed like scattered firecrackers. A nearby competitor flinched at the sound, clearly a newcomer himself. "Volunteers this way," read a bold sign near the entrance. Several men in camouflage and sponsor-covered jackets glanced her direction with barely concealed amusement. One tall figure, Marcus Wellington, a three-time state champion, strode past and offered unsolicited advice. "Best keep clear of the firing line, miss. This isn't a place for casual observers." Sarah forced a polite smile, uncertain whether to laugh or bristle. Another professional, Vincent Russo, overheard the comment while cleaning his rifle barrel, and chuckled in agreement. The sting of dismissal hit deeper than expected, but Sarah reminded herself she was only there to help. Yet something stirred within her, that familiar whisper that asked, "What if you could do more than watch? What if you belong out there too?" Morning registration began with military precision. Names echoed over loudspeakers with official authority that made everyone straighten their posture. Sarah quietly distributed forms and answered basic questions, but her eyes kept drifting across the field. She watched seasoned shooters adjust their scopes, test their stances, and squint at distances that seemed impossibly far. She had fired a .22 rifle a few times as a teenager, plinking cans off her uncle's fence posts. But this was a different universe entirely, one where people spoke in ballistic coefficients and wind drift calculations. Then she noticed Franklin Torres, a range official with silver hair and an easy demeanor. He caught the curious look in Sarah's eyes and ambled over, his gait slow but purposeful. First time at Ridgewood, his voice carried a fatherly warmth. Sarah explained her volunteer role, mentioning how fascinating she found the whole environment, despite never participating in formal competition. Franklin nodded thoughtfully, removing his cap to scratch his weathered scalp. "Don't underestimate what can happen on a place like this," he said, gesturing toward the precisely arranged shooting lanes. "Surprising talent emerges when folks least expect it." "Oh, I'm just here to help," Sarah wanted to deflect, but something in Franklin's knowing expression made her pause. Memories surfaced unbidden. The satisfaction of watching tin cans tumble from fence posts, the gentle teasing from family members who insisted girls her age should prefer gentler pursuits, and that inexplicable rush whenever she squeezed a trigger. That feeling had never truly disappeared. It had simply hibernated beneath layers of routine, overshadowed by her work as a research librarian in a quiet university town. The day progressed with more competitors arriving, each radiating confidence. They carried advanced bipods, computerized scopes, and ballistic calculators. Sarah attempted conversations, but most responses were politely brief. Marcus, the state champion, actually laughed when she asked about the difficulty of long-range shooting. "You probably don't want to know," he said with a dismissive shrug. "Just some advice. Stay behind the safety barriers. Big rifles, big noise." He hefted his custom rifle for emphasis before walking away. Sarah forced herself to remain composed. Maybe he hadn't meant to be cruel, but the condescension stung nonetheless. By noon, Franklin returned to the volunteer area with a grin that suggested mischief. He placed a rifle case on the table in front of Sarah, eyes twinkling with possibility. "If you're not opposed, how about helping me test a scope? I need a fresh perspective." Sarah froze, uncertain if he was serious. Around them, professionals loaded magazines and shared technical insights. Nerves fluttered in her stomach, but curiosity won. Franklin opened the case, revealing a bolt-action 223 with a quality scope attached. "We'll keep it simple, minus 200 yards, nothing fancy. I promise not to embarrass you." Sarah smiled appreciatively, though doubt gnawed her confidence. In her memory, she could see her younger self pressing a rifle stock against her shoulder, surprised every time by the recoil, yet somehow achieving steady aim. She'd never fully understood what that natural steadiness might mean, having pursued other interests like literature and quiet contemplation. But now the opportunity stood before her. She took a steadying breath, picked up the rifle case, and followed Franklin to an unused lane. The surreal nature of the moment struck her immediately. All around, serious competitors in professional gear stared with mild incredulity at the volunteer in a simple hoodie stepping up to fire. One whispered sarcastically, "Hope she doesn't hurt herself." Franklin ignored the comments, guiding Sarah gently through the setup. He showed her how to position the bipod on the bench, adjust the angle properly, then directed her attention to a small target roughly 200 yards away, partially obscured by morning haze. "Take it slow," he advised, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember to breathe, exhale halfway, then squeeze." Sarah aligned the scope crosshairs carefully, feeling her pulse thunder in her ears. Time seemed to slow as everything else faded away: the distant chatter, the damp scent of grass, the watchers with their raised eyebrows. Only one detail mattered: placing those crosshairs exactly on target center. She paused, lungs expanding softly, then released half that breath and pressed the trigger gently. Crack. The bullet sliced through the calm morning air. Franklin peered through his spotting scope, then raised a triumphant fist. Sarah's face lit with relief. "Right near the bullseye," Franklin declared, his grin broadening. Several onlookers had turned in surprise, perhaps expecting her to miss entirely. Their expressions suggested rapid reassessment of their assumptions. Sarah set the rifle down, swallowing a wave of excitement that felt almost foreign. She tried not to beam too openly, but inside, her heart soared. Franklin patted her shoulder encouragingly. "That's a fine start, but remember, it's not just about hitting one shot. It's about understanding every variable. Don't get overconfident." She nodded, acknowledging how much more she had to learn. Yet that single bullet's trajectory already whispered possibilities. Perhaps you're capable of more than volunteering. Perhaps you found something you never knew you needed. The afternoon passed quickly between registration duties and stolen glimpses of other participants refining their skills. Sarah noticed how they adjusted windage settings, analyzed ballistic charts on smartphones, and frowned in concentration. The level of discipline impressed her and sparked genuine curiosity. Perhaps with dedicated effort, she too could stand among them. She remembered the mocking glances and dismissive remarks. In another setting, she might have retreated. But now she held on to the memory of that near bullseye at 200 yards, inspiring her to linger and learn more. By late afternoon, the head coordinator, a briskly efficient man named David Shelton, summoned everyone for an announcement. There would be a friendly warm-up shoot the next morning, unofficial, and just for fun, aimed at letting participants prepare for the main competition. The first portion would be at 300 yards, then they'd extend targets to 500 yards. Anyone interested could sign up at no extra charge. Predictably, the top professionals showed minimal interest. 300 yards was elementary for them. However, Franklin grinned at Sarah. "You should do it," he whispered, eyes holding that same encouraging gleam. Sarah hesitated, but curiosity outweighed nerves. She wrote her name on the sign-up sheet, aware of quiet chuckles from those who spotted the volunteer registering. "You really want to shoot?" Marcus teased as he passed, adjusting his scope case strap. Sarah forced a confident nod, though her stomach felt queasy. She had until morning to prepare mentally. Franklin agreed to let her borrow the rifle, a decent .223 that wasn't designed for extreme distances, but would suffice for 300 or 500 yards. He promised to help her zero it at sunrise. That night, in her modest motel room near Ridgewood, Sarah replayed the day's events. She felt both uneasy and electrified. As she changed into pajamas, her thoughts circled the possibility of embarrassing herself publicly, especially in front of the condescending ones. She tried to stifle that worry, reminding herself this was a chance to explore something new. Before drifting off, she whispered, "I can't do this halfway. It might be my only opportunity, but if I don't try, I'll never know." With that resolve, she drifted into shallow, dream-filled sleep. Morning arrived with light dew glistening on grass, the range sparkling in early sunshine. The friendly warm-up shoot was scheduled for 7 a.m. sharp. A few dozen participants prepared their stations, some calm, others fussing with last-minute scope checks. Sarah wore the same hoodie, but had tied her hair into a neat ponytail. Franklin stood nearby, guiding her through a quick rifle check. After Sarah fired several practice rounds at 100 yards to confirm her zero, she nodded timidly. She was as ready as she'd ever be. They lined up at the 300-yard mark. Sarah recognized many faces from yesterday, confident eyes, steely demeanors. A crackling loudspeaker announced, "Shooters, 300-yard warm-up. Commence firing." Sarah didn't overthink. She adjusted her sight, inhaled slowly, exhaled halfway, the finger resting lightly on the trigger. Crack. The bullet soared across the field. Franklin peered through his spotting scope and gave a thumbs up. "You're on paper," he said with a slight pause. "A bit left, but close." Relief swept through her. She repeated the process, each shot creating a tighter group, as other rifles boomed in quick succession, their owners locked in skilled precision. When time came to shift to 500 yards, Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This would be her longest distance yet. She wiped a tiny bead of sweat from her brow, telling herself she could handle it. The wind seemed calmer than usual, but any slight gust at 500 yards could shift bullets significantly. She recalled that single shot from her teenage years, marveling at how it had found its mark. Summoning the same sense of calm, she leaned in and studied her aim. One shot, then another. The scoreboard soon revealed that out of several dozen participants, she ranked near the middle. Not stellar, not terrible. Yet for someone expected just to watch, it was a small triumph. Some professional shooters appeared indifferent, but a few seemed intrigued that this quiet volunteer had outscored them in certain segments. A short wave of murmurs fluttered along the benches. Sarah felt her cheeks warm, uncertain if the attention was positive or mocking. She learned that day how crucial confidence was in this environment. Hesitate, and the target might slip away. After the shoot, Franklin suggested she consider entering the official match scheduled for 2 days later. Its standard format, short distance, then medium, culminating in a single highlight round at 1,200 yards, he explained, his tone gentle but serious. Sarah swallowed hard at the mention of 1,200 yards, a distance that felt almost mythical. She'd always assumed it was reserved for the top 1% of shooters, people who study ballistic charts like sacred texts. Could she even attempt that distance? She admitted her self-doubt, voice trembling. Franklin listened, then offered a kindly smile. You have raw skill. You've hit 500 yards on your first real attempt. Not many can claim that. If I help you with wind calls and more practice, you might surprise yourself. A flicker of resolve blossomed inside her. She thought of the contemptuous remarks, the sideways stares. Perhaps if she could hold her own at 1,200 yards, those sneers would vanish. Maybe this was her chance to prove something to herself. She hesitated only a moment before softly replying, "Let's do it. But I'm terrified." Franklin gave a reassuring nod. Fear keeps you focused. Use it. Over the next day, Sarah threw herself into intensive training. She started early under pale morning light, practicing controlled breathing. Franklin provided an accelerated crash course in reading wind patterns. She scribbled notes in a small spiral-bound pad: angles, velocity, bullet drop. Occasionally, competitors with expensive rifles passed by and watched. She detected skepticism and, in a couple, mild hostility. Perhaps they resented an unknown volunteer stepping into their domain. Vincent Russo even removed his ear protection just to mutter, "What a waste of range time," before stalking off. Sarah felt her nerves spike, but Franklin's calm presence anchored her. They continued shot by shot, building her confidence. By evening, she managed consistent groups at 600 yards. Though hardly perfect, it was progress. She realized fatigue, both physical and mental, was a genuine factor. Her shoulder ached from repeated recoil, her eyes strained from peering through the scope. She recalled that old phrase from childhood, "I'd only have one shot, but it could change everything." It kept her pushing forward. Finally, the official match day dawned. The sky was tinted pink, a spectacular backdrop for the tension hovering over the range. A new wave of competitors flooded Ridgewood, men and women in high-grade shooting jackets, ballistic computers strapped to their arms, some sporting sponsor patches. Sarah, by contrast, wore that familiar hoodie. Franklin had at least convinced her to wear shooting gloves for better grip. The atmosphere crackled with excitement. Everyone knew that after preliminary distances minus 300, 600, and 800 yards, there would be a culminating shot at 1,200 yards to decide top positions. Sarah's stomach felt queasy. She took deep breaths, reminding herself she had proven capable at medium ranges. Still, 1,200 yards was a different beast entirely. The coordinator called everyone into position for the 300-yard portion first. Adrenaline spiked through her as she found her lane. Her opening round was decent. She stayed focused, ignoring the row of watchers who occasionally glanced her direction. She advanced with modest scores through 600 and 800 yards, not the best, but better than many expected. Then the final stage arrived. An official voice boomed from the loudspeaker, instructing participants to prepare for the 1,200-yard shot. Sarah's throat went dry. She approached the lane with Franklin by her side. He whispered last-minute advice, detailing wind patterns he observed through his scope. "You have 3 minutes to get set and take your best shot," the official clarified. "Once we call time, you must fire." She steadied the rifle on its bipod, adjusting for elevation. The distance looked unimaginable. She heard the rush of blood in her ears, her heart hammering. This was the moment so many doubted she could handle. She pictured the swirling rumors about her presence, people mocking her audacity. She also recalled the exhilarating feeling each time she overcame a new hurdle. She caught Franklin giving her a nod. Then the loudspeaker crackled. "You may begin. 3 minutes on the clock." She inhaled, counting silently, exhaled halfway, finger hovering over the trigger. Her entire world narrowed to the scope's crosshairs. The wind flag flapped unpredictably. She glanced at Franklin one last time. He indicated a slight left hold. She twisted the windage knob. She let air slip from her lungs, then paused, an intentional break in the chaos, letting tension build. Her mind teetered between panic and determination. She whispered internally, "I promised not to do this halfway." Then she pressed the trigger. Crack. The sound reverberated across the field, merging with the chorus of other shots. For an instant, she froze, watching for any sign from the spotter downrange. Everything hung in limbo. Then a frenzied wave swept over the watchers near the target area. One official raised a colored paddle, indicating a confirmed bullseye. Shock rippled through the crowd. Hushed gasps and scattered exclamations of disbelief replaced earlier chatter. People craned their necks to see who had managed such a perfect hit. Some rubbed their eyes in stunned amazement, not expecting it from her. Sarah blinked, breathing still shallow. Franklin broke into a broad grin, squeezing her shoulder in triumph. Her entire body felt warm, as if all doubts were melting away. Others on the range stood motionless. A few rifles were halfway through reloading, their owners gaping as though they couldn't believe what they'd witnessed. The coordinator, who had barely glanced at Sarah when she signed up, hurried over, adjusting his microphone. "Sarah Martinez," he read off the scoreboard. "That is indeed a bullseye at 1,200 yards." The crackle of astonishment in his voice confirmed how unthinkable this scenario must have seemed. The next several minutes blurred. A wave of murmurs spread, some in awe, others laced with jealousy or confusion. Marcus Wellington, who once advised her to stay behind barriers, now glowered while pretending to check his phone. Vincent Russo, who'd teased her about big guns, big noise, simply stared with his mouth slightly open. Franklin, hardly able to contain his pride, nudged her. "You did it," he whispered. "You absolutely did it." Sarah tried to speak, but a flood of emotions, relief, joy, disbelief, choked her words. Instead, she allowed herself a trembling smile. Everyone around them seemed to shift energy. Those once dismissive now found themselves re-evaluating preconceived notions. Meanwhile, the competition continued, but Sarah's result had become the day's defining moment, overshadowing even established names. When the match concluded, the final scoreboard showed Sarah in the top bracket overall. She hadn't swept every stage, but that single perfect shot at the greatest distance catapulted her to near-legendary status among participants. Interviewers from local shooting magazines approached, asking how she accomplished such a feat. She blinked at them, caught off guard. "I only took it one shot at a time," she replied modestly, trying to hide nerves behind a polite laugh. "Maybe I was just lucky." But deep down, she knew it was more than luck. It was focus, encouragement from Franklin, and a determined refusal to remain a mere onlooker. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, match organizers presented her with a small plaque recognizing her unexpected achievement. The crowd applauded, some politely, others with genuine enthusiasm. Several higher-ranked professionals offered congratulations, though Sarah sensed in some a grudging respect, as if they couldn't quite reconcile how a volunteer had rattled the established order. Franklin stood at her side like a proud mentor, occasionally trading jokes with range officials. Sarah clutched the plaque, recalling that terrifying moment when she first shouldered the borrowed rifle, prepared to fail yet determined to give her best. Now she realized the significance of proving something not only to others but to herself. As evening fell, she walked through the range one final time, noticing how quiet had replaced the earlier cacophony of shots. A warm breeze carried the scent of cut grass. She closed her eyes, letting adrenaline slowly dissipate, replaying that single shot in her mind. A gentle tap on her shoulder made her turn. It was Vincent Russo, the marksman who once seemed so condescending. He looked uncharacteristically sheepish. "I guess I owe you an apology," he said, a trace of humility in his voice. "You really showed us something." Sarah offered a small smile, appreciating the gesture. She realized that sometimes even the most prideful individuals could be disarmed by genuine skill. Before departing, she found Franklin near one of the benches, packing his gear. He motioned for her to sit, and they talked about her next steps. Apparently, there was an invitation-only event in a few months, at a more prestigious location, and he believed she might qualify if she kept practicing. His words came measured, careful not to overwhelm her. "There's more to this than just hitting bullseyes," he cautioned, tapping the side of his head. "You need mental endurance, but you've already got heart. That's a start." Sarah nodded, touched by how he had guided her so patiently. In the days that followed, social media buzzed among the shooting community. Short clips captured the moment she fired that final shot. Photos showed her modest stance next to the scoreboard, proclaiming the triumph of the underdog. Sarah returned home to her routine of library work, but a subtle transformation had taken place. She felt more confident, more alive. Conversations with friends inevitably turned to the shoot. They listened in awe as she recounted the tension, the hush that fell after her bullet found its mark. Though she still considered herself a newcomer, something deep inside had awakened. She realized her future might hold more than she ever imagined if she continued on this path. Sometimes at the library, she would look up ballistic charts during breaks or watch tutorial videos on advanced shooting techniques. Coworkers teased her affectionately, "Better not mess with Sarah. She's deadly at 1,200 yards." She laughed it off, feeling an odd mix of pride and embarrassment. Yet her heart warmed at the memory of that single shot, the one that upended countless assumptions. One evening, Franklin called to check in, wondering if she was still committed to refining her newly discovered passion. She found herself answering with enthusiasm, inquiring about better rifles and additional accessories. He chuckled, reminding her not to lose that original spark in the chase for fancy equipment. "Skill is more important than any price tag," he remarked. "You learned that the day you outshot half those folks with a borrowed rifle. Remember it." She smiled, acknowledging the truth of his words. Time rolled on, and a local range near her hometown heard about her feat at Ridgewood. They invited her to conduct a brief workshop for novices, especially women who wanted to learn basic marksmanship but felt intimidated by the culture. Sarah found herself in front of a small group of curious faces, some as uncertain as she had been. She started by recounting how she once stood on the sidelines, told only to watch, and how a single unexpected chance revealed her potential. She spoke with sincerity that resonated with these beginners. The quiet twinge of self-doubt, the rush of adrenaline, and the sweet relief of seeing a bullet strike home. Standing there, she became aware of how life-changing one supportive mentor or one act of courage could be. She demonstrated simple fundamentals: how to hold the rifle, the concept of breath control, the importance of relaxing shoulders. Each time someone took their first shot and turned around with shining eyes, Sarah felt a tug on her heart, remembering that feeling herself. She realized she was now passing on the spark that Franklin had ignited in her. A few weeks later, as she prepared to travel for another event, the memory of that day at Ridgewood glowed in her mind. She recalled every detail: the morning haze, the hostile stares, the dryness in her throat, and then that magical hush that followed her bullseye. Somehow that hush echoed still, reminding her that she had shattered boundaries for herself and possibly for others who saw in her a glimpse of their own potential. On her desk, she kept that small plaque. She looked at it whenever doubts clouded her mind. "I only have one shot, but it could change everything," she would murmur with a tiny smile. In the grander scheme, she recognized she wasn't a mainstream star or heavily sponsored champion. She was just Sarah, an ordinary woman in jeans and a hoodie with an unassuming rifle and enough resolve to try. Yet that alone was enough to earn her place in local shooting lore. The notion of being dismissed had transformed into motivation that propelled her forward. She might never be free of butterflies when stepping onto a range, but she learned to harness them. Months passed. She took on new challenges, longer ranges, competing in mild wind and rain. Her aim improved, posture stabilized, and mindset grew more resilient. Every so often, Franklin would drop by with encouraging words or reminders to keep her form aligned. In reflective moments, she realized how that single invitation to test the scope had altered her entire life trajectory. If not for Franklin, she might have remained in the shadows, folding pamphlets at the volunteer desk, never discovering her latent talent. Eventually, a well-known regional competition extended a formal invitation for her to participate. Sponsors started whispering her name, curious if she might blossom into a formidable competitor. The same people who once scoffed now gave friendly nods or at least refrained from previous mockery. Sarah graciously accepted the opportunity while retaining her trademark humility. She trained harder, read about ballistic coefficient tables, and refined her wind reading. Yet she kept reminding herself that equipment, while helpful, was only part of the formula. The rest was patience, concentration, and the heart to try when odds looked daunting. On the night before she left for that significant regional match, she stood in her dimly lit room, reviewing every detail one last time. She visualized 1,200-yard targets, the path of her bullet, the swirl of air. She also replayed that day at Ridgewood, the moment she closed her eyes briefly, took a calm breath, and pressed the trigger. She nearly laughed at how she ever let fear rule her. Now it drove her to excel. A silent ally instead of an insurmountable threat. While packing her range bag, she paused to place a small note inside. "I promised not to do this halfway." That phrase, scribbled in her handwriting, acted as a personal compass. She turned off the light, reminding herself that tomorrow was just another step on this blossoming journey. Tomorrow might bring new revelations or perhaps more adversity, but she felt quiet confidence in her bones. The next day, as she walked up to the registration booth of the bigger competition, several staff members blinked in recognition. One politely asked, "You're that volunteer from Ridgewood, right? The one who shocked everyone with the 1,200-yard Bullseye." Sarah nodded with a slight grin, never sure how to respond to such remarks. She realized her story had spread more widely than she guessed. Those once skeptical now talked about her with curiosity and respect. That validation was something she never sought, but appreciated nonetheless. And so a woman initially told to stand aside, to watch from the perimeter, had turned that vantage point into wisdom. Through a handful of determined shots, she revealed a capacity no one suspected. Perhaps the biggest revelation was that you never truly know who harbors hidden gifts until they are allowed to show them. Sarah stepped onto the new range with the same gray hoodie, rifle in hand, and a spark in her eyes. She felt the rush of possibility again, the quiet thrill of stepping onto uncertain ground. In the crowd, some recognized her. Others remained unaware of her backstory, failing to see that behind her gentle demeanor lay an unshakable core. She gave them a polite nod and began to set up, still mindful of fundamentals, still harnessing that disciplined breath control. She recognized that every competition, every shot, was a piece of a larger puzzle she was slowly assembling in her life. Not everyone would understand. Some might never drop their judgment. But that was fine. She knew the truth. All it took was a moment of clarity and a bold attempt to transform a doubter into a believer, starting with oneself. As range officials called out instructions, she felt a surge of adrenaline. She took her place, noticing for the first time that no one pushed her aside or insisted she remain behind safety barriers. She owned her spot on that shooting line. The hush before the first volley was exhilarating. She closed her eyes briefly, recalling the swirl of rumors that once declared she wasn't cut out for this. Then she smiled, because she knew better. She had proven otherwise. Within that hush, she remembered Franklin's voice whispering encouraging words, her own vow not to do anything by half measures, and the intangible magic that happens when you persevere. Somewhere nearby, the loudspeaker crackled, preparing to announce the opening round. Her grip tightened on the rifle stock, the wood warm beneath her fingers. She felt an ache in her shoulder from training sessions leading up to this day, but that discomfort only reminded her how far she had come. She exhaled in a slow stream, letting stray doubts drift away. It was time to focus. The official's voice boomed, "All shooters, take aim." And in that single second, in that suspended hush brimming with opportunity, Sarah Martinez realized that what began as a spur-of-the-moment invitation to test the scope had evolved into a defining purpose. She readjusted her stance, aligned the crosshairs, and prepared to press the trigger, aware that once again, everything might change. She did not consider failure. She considered only the possibility that every shot was a new chance to prove that sometimes the simplest person in the room holds the greatest surprise. And so, with her heart pounding and mind clear, she squeezed the trigger, stepping once more into that realm where an overlooked volunteer could stun an entire range. Just as she had before, reminding them all that you never truly know who's watching until they decide to fire. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.